to the Levante webinar on statement audit as a best practice. My name is Tom Flynn. I'm the Vice President of Business Development with Levante, and I'm joined by Sherry Depew, who's the Vice President of Client Development with Levante. And we're going to talk about statement auditing today. But before we go into statement auditing, it's probably a good idea to talk a little bit about a larger context of profit recovery auditing in general. Sherry, can you talk a little bit about the history of profit recovery auditing and a little bit of the intention of the product when it was invented?
Sure. Profit recovery actually goes back, gosh, probably 40 years, well before ERP systems, when purchasing was done in one system and AP in another and payments in another. And the intent really was to identify duplicate payments primarily and incorrect payments, and then actually work with the customers and the suppliers to get the money, back to the firm's customers.
So that's profit recovery in a nutshell. So everyone's going to hear a lot about statement auditing, especially anybody who interfaces with Levante. Maybe just spend a moment on some of the differences or some of the similarities between statement auditing specifically and profit recovery.
Sure. Really, from a profit recovery standpoint, the firms come into your organization and they actually start with your internal documentation. So what they're really doing is looking at your AP information, so your vouchers, your invoices, your payments, your purchase orders, your contracts, your receipts, your general ledger, lots of data, and they're scrubbing through that again to find incorrect payments, incorrect pricing, opportunities for recovery again. And as a part of what they'll do oftentimes is a little bit of a send out a letter to suppliers, and that's what has been known as a statement audit. They'll just send out a letter to the top part of your suppliers and ask for a statement.
More of a sample.
Sampling, yeah, it's oftentimes the supplier files are huge, and certainly you couldn't manage asking 100,000, 50,000, even 30,000 suppliers for that. So really the difference between the original profit recovery environment, where they're really looking at your internal data, and a real focus on a statement audit, a Levante environment, is really actually going to the suppliers, not starting with your internal data, really starting with your supplier base and getting really comprehensive AR information. So when I say that, it's not necessarily just a statement, maybe an trial balance, it might be a computer printout. So it's a mix of AR data to really make sure that things are being applied correctly and that unapplied cash is taken back to the customer. So
what I know about you, Sherry, is you are uniquely suited to speak about statement auditing and profit recovery auditing in general because of your many years with Boise Cascade, heading up their global shared service department, and using a number of different profit recovery providers as well as statement audit providers. And you also have experience on the supplier side, working for many years with Levante. So with that experience in mind, can you talk a little bit about what are the key elements of making the most effective statement audit for your company?
Absolutely. Most importantly is any statement audit needs to be comprehensive. So that means it needs to target not your sample of your top 20, your top 100 suppliers. Really needs to have the capacity and ability, technology, to target all of your auditable spend. And auditable spend isn't your employees' expense reports necessarily from a profit recovery standpoint. But it really needs to target all of your auditable spend. It needs to be ongoing. It needs to, if you come in once a year and do a review of your top 100, you are missing a lot of the opportunities. So in order to be very effective, it needs to be fast, needs to not take a lot of your internal resources, and absolutely needs to be an ongoing process.
You mentioned not focusing on just the top 100 again. Sampling is effective when that's all you can manage, but the best practice would be to, or the key element you want to incorporate is all of your auditable spend. So all of your auditable spend could be a new term for some people. Can you just drill down a little bit into what is meant by all of your auditable spend?
Sure. Well, from an AP perspective, there are some vendors where we don't necessarily want to be draw attention to, so you probably don't want to ask the IRS for a statement. maybe not even your board of directors or your employees. Or are you public utility that's just going to put a credit on next month's invoice? So you need to work with someone who really has the technology to take those types of suppliers out of the mix. After you take those suppliers out of the mix, you should really be talking to everyone else. That's your auditable spend.
Oh, so what I'm hearing is the auditable spend is an exhaustive populations of vendors and suppliers. When we went through sort of those key elements of a statement audit as a best practice, you definitely touched on hitting your entire auditable spend as you just defined it. That's a major undertaking by anybody's definition. Can you talk a little bit about what Levante has done to make that type of breadth in communication possible through some of our technology and some of our communication software?
Certainly. First and foremost, it is not practical to expect that you can communicate with tens of thousands of suppliers without technology.
Right.
And even if you were able to communicate with them, then you would need to be able to manage the documents that you would secure. So you need technology not only to communicate with the suppliers, but to manage all the AR data that they're providing. So technology that takes kind of the human component away from securing the information that you need and facilitating the transfer of documents back and forth. Still requires auditors, experts in the field to look at documentation and identify what needs to be addressed, but where technology can do the work, you need technology to do that. And I've not seen anything outside of Levante that has actually come up with that technology.
Well, thank you, Sherry. That was kind of a crash course on statement auditing as a best practice. Again, we thank you so much for taking a look at this webinar on statement auditing as a best practice, and we hope you'll find a couple of other webinar titles online, download those, and take a look as well. Thank you again.